All right, we are live, and I'm very excited to welcome back today's guest. On today's episode, I interview an internationally renowned yoga teacher, founder of Blissology, a movement connecting yoga, nature, and community into transformational experiences that uplift the heart. And he's also the creator of Blissology on Demand, an online yoga and meditation platform. But most importantly, just been released his epic book. It's been over 10 years in the writing. Yoga Optimized, available at blissology.com, amazon.com, and various retailers worldwide. Welcome to the winner circle. Welcome back to the winner circle, Eoin Finn.
Good to be here. Oh my God, so happy.
So much to catch up on, but I think we should just catch up where we ended the last conversation. So, our last conversation, episode 62 of Welcome to the Winner Circle, we're now at episode 170. So,
Wow.
over 2 years gone by, almost over 100 episodes. And it's excited to have you back. In the last episode, we closed with three words that you would use to describe the world you are living in. And those three words you used were savage, bliss, and inspiration. Are those still the words you would use to describe your reality? And then let's get into those words, which on our last episode, which we went over your whole hero's journey, your story
Yeah.
to now. Um, yeah, those were the three words you used to
Yeah.
describe your the way you the world, the way you describe your world. Savage, bliss, and inspiration. Are those currently your three words? And yeah,
Yeah.
how's life?
I might have to add forgetful because I forgot I said that, but I'm glad you reminded me. But I
Yeah.
actually do have a tattoo on my arm that says Savage Bliss on it. So I'm constantly reminded, but tattoo or not, I definitely feel the savage blissness of the world. I was mentioning before we started, today was an interesting day. I just dropped my mom off for a surgery for cancer. And yeah, it's nice to be able to do something for mom and spend time together, but the circumstances are savage. But that's life, that is life. And we had some good laughs together, and that's really good, but there's still this underlying feeling of sadness. And I really feel that both the savage and the bliss part of life is really an integral part of being alive. And really, I mean, one theme we talk a lot about in our trainings and courses, and what I try and make experiences for in the classes that I teach, why I practice yoga, is because that pain that we feel can be something that we don't like, so we want to numb it out. Um, and I think there's a lot of Eastern traditions that say like, oh, just be in equanimity, just be in even state of mind no matter what. I've tried that route out. But what I really feel is that you need to go into these places of darkness. And yeah, I just made a little video about it. I really love biology. I love cells. I mean, just fascinated by cellular biology. And basically, the way I see it is that there's us and there's love out there as this force in the universe. Like gravity, electromagnetism is this beautiful force. And then basically, we get stuck in our own minds and we're not really receptive to love. But when pain comes, it docks onto the cell like a receptor. It opens a previously gated channel. And when pain docks on that receptor, it allows love to come in. And yeah, I really feel like it is beautiful to have experiences where we allow pain and our hardships to be our big teachers. Because what I say a lot is that if I didn't know the pain in me, I wouldn't know the pain in you, and I wouldn't care.
Uh,
And so from the savage part of it, from the pain part of it, comes the next one, the bliss. And people think about what is blissology, but what I've learned is actually pretty much a direct correlation that the more love you have in the life, the more bliss you have. So those are the first two words.
First two words, and I'm excited to kind of ask something about those two words before we get to the third word, inspiration. So, would
Yeah.
you say savage and bliss, would those be like opposites? The way you say those words, like dualities?
No, I mean, for me, I think that, well, I've been think that bliss is an interesting word. I mean, here I am to teach something called Blissology. And I think the problem with bliss is that most people, the way they use the term bliss, it's a hedonic state where, you're in a hammock somewhere in Mexico having a beer, and there's certain chemicals that get released when you do that, and the sun's on your body, and it just feels like you have physically pleasant sensations, much better than being cold in Winnipeg in the snow, whatever. So, or like, oh, I'm so blissful right now, or someone massages the back of your neck, and that's much better than sitting in an office all day. So, okay, now I'm in a state of bliss, and I'm not trying to say that that hedonic state is not something that's not good from time to time. But I think there's another type of bliss again that, I mean, look, wow, we're really getting deep into it already, but we all see people who have hard time with alcohol, even if it's just socially, with substances, like where I live here in Victoria, British Columbia, is a huge fentanyl and opium problem. Like there's just a lot of people trying to numb out the pain that they feel all together. And so, I mean, something that you have to really experience if you've never been to the classes that I do, but I always try and I feel like when people come together, we just come on this, we get together in this frequency, and there's this feeling that it's through the darkness that you get to the light, like Carl Jung says that you don't get enlightened by imagining figures of light, you make the darkness conscious. So I feel like there is like one tone to savage bliss. It's a certain type of bliss. I mean, the tattoo, maybe if I give you an analogy, we'll summarize it. It's a wolf
Mm,
howl. And if you just think of a wolf howl, I mean, it's not a wolf howl, it's a wolf, but the wolf represents to me um, a, like when I hear a wolf howling, I can't tell if it's really happy or if it's completely lonely. It's just this mix. And so if I had to go to another planet and tell aliens what's it like to be a human, I'd actually play them a wolf howl. And oddly, just to go
mm,
one more level on this, my dad, when I was young, he's gone, physical form. He died a while ago. But when I was young, we'd wrestle a lot. Like
yeah.
boys would wrestle, and he'd always go, "Yeah, let's get wild, let's howl," and we'd howl like wolves as we wrestled when we were really young. So yeah, at his funeral, and that's the way we put his casket down, is we gave a wolf howl. So just if anyone's lost a parent, and I'm sure most people lost at least a grandparent. There's that feeling when you're putting somebody in the ground for the last time or burning them however they go. And yeah, there's just that beautiful, happy, sad, bittersweet feeling. And that's what I'm calling savage bliss, one thing. And it's really, again, just to put a bow on it, it can be an unpleasant sensation for people, but I really want people to learn how to say yes to it.
And we'll get more into the benefits of pain. Pain has been a guiding force on your journey, and you used it very positively. And you write a lot about that in the book.
Yeah.
But before we get there, let's talk about that third word you left us with last time, and that's inspiration. What
Yeah.
does that mean to you, and how are you inspired in your life today?
Inspiration. Wow. I mean, literally the root means in spirit, to bring spirit inside of you. And I really love that our ancestors had that word. It actually means breathe in too, like inspired, breathe something in. But to me, inspiration is super important because actually, one of my teachers is Tom Myers, and I actually agree with him a lot. He, if you don't know, has a book called Anatomy Training, so I think I recommend it almost daily to people. Anyway, he says quite often that the purpose of life is learning. And one thing that I think you'll get in the book too is quite a deep dive into physiology and biomechanics, psychology, philosophy. But I really think that, but the pillars of it are reverence, um, wisdom, and kindness. Like I basically, you can become. Here's where I'm going with this: is that I started to say this just a few weeks ago. It has to do with inspiration. That nerdiness mixed with awe is divine, right? So a lot of people become nerds because they'll get a good grade, they'll get a good SAT score, they'll get into the best college, they'll be smarter than other people, they'll get status. But I think that's the wrong approach to try and learn something. If you really, learn about anything, like, I mean, I'm particularly interested in bodies, but whatever, the ocean, the ecosystem, whatever it is, even like the economy, whatever it is, that to really deeply dive into it and learn, I just feel like that is the key to life, going back to what Tom Meyer said. But I think that's what it means to be inspired as well. Like, I mean, I tell people a lot, like I've been practicing yoga now for 37 years. And it's, you know, you think it would be stale, right? When you think about doing, like, someone's had the same job for 37 years, they're like, oh my God, I got to go do the same thing. But it's more exciting. Like, I'm more inspired than ever. But I think that's the key, is just don't stop learning. So the inspiration and learning kind of come in one package to me. And so
Mm,
when you're really just blown away by how things work, and that inspires you to live a certain way.
beautiful. So Ian, what would be most true and present for you right now in your world?
Ooh, um, most true and present for me right now. I would say that, yeah, I'd say that I have to remind myself a lot that I was gonna say one thing, like it's okay to be squeezed. Like, I guess, like, I feel like life, it's not just some of the things I told you about with my family, stuff like that. Actually, a lot has to do with this book. Like, I always joke with people I could write a book about self-publishing, what not to do, but that would defeat the purpose because it's a lot, like how it can squeeze you financially in all these different ways. Um, but um, but I realized that in the times in life where life squeezes you, it's actually pushing you in a good direction. For me, it's just, like I said, writing this book has been a real big cosmic two by four. Like, not writing it, actually the post-production. Like, I mean, I don't want to bore you with it. We don't need to bring it up. But things like fulfillment, warehousing, invoicing, tax tracking, all this other stuff, just like, whoa, it's been intense. And like all the adult, there's just a lot of, to bring my bliss out into the world, there's like such a big dose of adulting that comes with it. It's crazy. But so I feel like life is squeezing me, but I think, like, I've always felt, and anyone who's gone through it, let's say you break up with somebody, like, why is this happening? I'm so sad. Or you move and you're like, why am I losing all my friends? Whatever. But when you look back on life, it's like this invisible hand was pushing you. So on the other
Mm,
side of it, of what I was first saying, it's okay to be squeezed. I guess the other thing that's true for me is, and I guess I have all these sayings to help me through things I don't really think of as mantras, but trust is a must, right? So I know it's cliche to say trust the process, but I do uh, lean into that a lot and go, okay, it's like not the easiest ride in the world right now, but I trust.
I love that. It's all happening for you, and it really comes to it's one of my favorite things from yoga philosophy, and that's the fifth niyama, that's Ishvara Pranadhana.
Yeah,
Um, Humble surrender to a divine force guiding you, that invisible hand, as you spoke of, which I believe is a Joseph Campbell
yeah,
um,
yeah. Reference. I'm glad. Yeah, I think we probably talked about
reference.
that last time. Yeah, I
Mhm.
was thinking when I said, I'm like, oh, I didn't give a footnote to Joseph Campbell. It's hard to footnote everyone, so I'm glad you brought that up. But
Ishvara Pranadhana.
it's amazing. It's a great topic. Yeah, I mean, it is so central to yoga, and I mean, I wrote a whole book. I think probably last time I talked to you, I was just wrapping it up. I haven't. It's still on Google Docs. I haven't done it, but wrote a whole book about the Yoga Sutras. I'm really super
Yeah.
interested in them, and I love that you brought it up into that because it is a big part of yoga. I don't know if I want to. I mean, we could tether it to the Yoga Sutras, but just keeping it to yoga in general. Yeah, surrendering to a higher power. I like this idea of a higher power because there's a lot of people that are secular that don't believe in God. And there's a lot of people who do, and there's a lot of people who are spiritual but not religious, but it just allows you to, when you just go, yeah, I'm going to surrender to a higher power, to be like, yeah, life, nature, universe, like you have this, like I'm not ultimately the doer here. I've got work inside of me. People are religious, are like, yeah, I'm doing God's work and whatever I'm doing, and okay, there's a challenge to make this come out into the world. But I guess it comes back to that inspiration again. Like there is I think anyone who decides to practice or teach yoga, they've got a calling to do it. They've got a higher power that's coming through them, and
Hmm.
it's hard to stay focused on that sometimes because we do get squeezed in this industry.
It's interesting how it all comes for full circle. It also relates back to the wolf too, because the wolf from indigenous culture represents humility.
Yeah,
That's that's the lesson
yeah,
of the wolf. So it's just all pointing us back to that same thing is just surrender, ease, right? Yoga Sutra 2.46, like stability, find stability and ease in your asanas.
yeah.
Um, it's such a beautiful science, yoga, and your
It is.
journey to it has been vast. You started in 1987 when you were th when you were 37 years old. It was your first year university, and you got into yoga really different than most people. You got in through it through the philosophy, and then the meditation, and then the asanas last. So yeah, now you are here, an author of this your book Yoga Optimized. And last time we talked, you were mentioning that you were mentioning you had a few books on the go. You had one with the sutras, you had one about anatomy, you said, and then you had another one, which I think was probably this one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what made you decide to go with Yoga Optimized? And it's your fourth rewriting of it too.
Third,
You
third, third. Yeah.
third,
Yeah.
because you have to keep on rewriting it, you mentioned, because it
Yep.
was like too scientific and you wanted the layman, you just wanted the everyday person to be able to read it and apply it not only to their physical yoga practice and keep them safer, but just to better know themselves and their bodies.
You took amazing notes. That's amazing. That's great. I'm glad you retained so much, and it's a real honor to talk to somebody who's really interested because you wouldn't retain that otherwise. I had to laugh because the dog started barking. You probably heard that, and I think maybe it got the wolf memo. So yeah. So the question basically is what like why let me just jump into it. Yeah, I do have a lot of books in me, but I actually wanted to bring this one out first, and I'm really proud of how it came out, the Yoga Optimized. And it's true, I did write it three different times. And it's very hard. I mean, part of it is it's really hard to write about human movement. It's easy to show people, it's not super easy to show people, but when you can um, show things and put your hands on people, that's really important. And it's really important too, like that there is, people need to know that there's going to be a course where you can learn all this stuff and teachers that are qualified to teach it as well. Because it is nice to get that kinesthetic touch on these principles. But to get the concepts across to people, it's tricky. It's really hard. So you're right. I wouldn't say that it was too scientific before. I mean, now, like what I've actually found is that there is a way of making it more simple, right? So I feel there's still a fair bit of science in there, like, and don't let me scare you. Like, it's honestly nothing that you didn't learn in 10th grade. Like, I feel like there's no level of science beyond 10th grade science in this book. But I do feel that there is a bit of a gap in yoga that we're actually so caught up in this concept called alignment that we're actually missing good biomechanics and good physics because so much of what we call alignment is actually based on aesthetics. Anyway, maybe we'll get into that topic or not. I'm not sure, but just coming back to what I learned writing the book on the third time is that, oh, okay. What I did was I learned, okay, now I'm going to separate the book into need to know and deep dive. So people who are, maybe a little newer to yoga, you can just read there's actually, I don't know if I can find a picture of it, but I like little icons. So there's a shark with a book in its hand. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this. There's a little shark here with a book in its
Yeah,
hand. So
Yeah.
that's like need to know. And then there'll be another part of it where it's more of a deep dive, and the guy's got a whale with a nerd glasses on. Yeah, here it is here. There's a deep dive part. So then let me see if I can line this up. Yeah, so there's a whale with glasses on reading the book. So that's for if you want to get a deep dive. So putting things in different buckets and parsing it out for like, okay, I'm just new to yoga. I don't have much time. I just want to read this much. Good. Just read this little shark section. But if you really are that deep dive, and it can be the same person like 2 years later, you're like, wow, I need that deep dive explanation of XYZ pose or whatever. Then you can go back and read that. That helped me to make it more simple. The other reason why I had to rewrite it, because I really realized that, honestly, I mean, kind of a good example is the first time I do it, I just take a picture of a pose. But how did you get into it? Like, what I learned is that 90% of a yoga pose is actually how you got into it. And
Uh-huh.
so um, then I'd have to take pictures of like step by step by step, like step one, do this, step two. So sequences.
The
The problem is
foundations.
once I switched to doing things in sequences, then none of the old text fit. So I had to like rewrite all the text again to fit the photos. So
Uh-huh.
that was
Uh-huh.
another whole process on its own as well. So yeah, I just things that you wouldn't really know. There was no playbook that I had, but I sure learned the hard way.
But now it's here, and you have all that experience on how to self-publish and all the obstacles and all the hiccups to help you as you release your future books.
Yes.
So, but why did you pick Yoga Optimize over your anatomy book or your Yoga Sutras book? So, yeah, like what about this book made it your first one that you wanted to publish? And what,
Um, yeah, it's actually interesting that I would say the main thing is that I feel like one of the problems with yoga, asana, okay, obviously I think most people out there are educated to know there's yoga. Yoga means basically meditation, but then there's asana, which means the physical practice.
Mhm.
But I feel like most people, their experience with yoga is the asana, right? Okay, so I feel like one of the problems with it is that it's actually a spiritual technique. What I'm saying is the problem is that it's done what I see anyway in a very sloppy way because of that, right?
Uh-huh.
Like maybe we can get into it a little bit later too. And I don't know if this is going to be audio or video, but I'm just going to tell you what I'm doing. Like, let's say you're a personal trainer and you go to the gym and I'm doing a bicep
Yeah.
curl. And instead of keeping my elbow still, so again, I'm just trying to describe it in case it's just audio for people, and using my bicep muscle to make it stronger to isolate what I'm doing. If I start swinging my back and doing in weightlifting what's called ego lifting, then
Yeah.
I'm just going to hurt my back and I'm not actually putting the tension on my bicep muscle that I'm trying to do. And what I really got clear on, actually, that was an analogy that came to me by working with a baseball player in the LA Dodgers many years ago. When I started to share some of the work from Yoga Optimize, he's like, "Oh my God, what you're trying to do to get people to be strict about applying stretch and tension on their muscles and distribute the load on their joints is what my personal trainer does. He makes me use less weight, but with better form. And I feel like that's the big lesson that I'm offering, like one of them in the yoga practice to help people see that literacy gap of you're actually not creating proper stretch on the muscle. You're trying to get your hand to the floor. And in that, the risk of injury goes way up and the benefits of the practice go way down. And so you mentioned the Yoga Sutras. I mean, to frame it in, the first niyama is ahimsa, right? So you're actually creating harm to your own self in this in this physical practice of yoga. And maybe even if you're not harming yourself, you're not actually treating yourself with the wisdom that you could. And so so actually let me see if I can make this really simple. And that is that actually there's spiritual lessons in good biomechanics. Like, and also let me say it the opposite way, I guess. I've never said this exactly this way, but if you don't have good biomechanical knowledge and you are doing sophisticated things in gravity, no matter what your spiritual intention is, I think you're actually straying from the mark in yoga practice. So basically, like, I would love to talk to you about not stealing and trying to find God and all these other things that are in the Yoga Sutras, and I have. But why didn't that come out first? It's because we gotta take care of the foundation first. It's basically, I feel like that's if we're doing asana, you need to learn how to do asana properly, and then we can layer all this other stuff on top of it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So many people are doing yoga rather than being done by yoga.
Mhm.
Um, and like your first section of the book talks about how yoga is a feeling, not just a shape. And there, everyone's not everyone, but a lot of people out there are out there posing. They're trying
Yeah,
to like do poses rather than recognizing like the eighth path of yoga that leads us to freedom, that leads us to liberation. Like the poses are just a tiny little piece of it.
yeah,
Um, and another interesting thing, I had a recent guest, a recent yogi on, and he talked about how a lot of people that are drawn to yoga are usually like hypermobile and naturally flexible, and like these type of people they can get into poses but they're not applying tension and they're just dumping into the joints, and that's going to create harm over time, and your whole book um, helps to prevent those kind of injuries.
yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, of course, people that are very bendy are going to love yoga the same way, if you're 6'5", you're probably going to love basketball more than someone
yeah.
5'5", right? So that's like obviously, people are going to gravitate to what they have genetic predispositions for. And yeah, there's two parts to that, I think. And that is one, even if you are a very bendy, hypermobile person, like buyer beware, as you're saying, okay, you might be very bendy, but really, this is where we get into the physics of it is like, yeah, you just mentioned it. What type of loads are you putting on your joints? And if you keep putting
Mhm.
that load on your joints year after year, are you actually going to promote growth or wear and tear? You know, are you going to do wear
Mhm.
and tear or wear and repair, right?
Yeah.
You need to put some stress on, but if you're putting the stress in inappropriate ways, you might actually be wearing things out. And the other part of it, just to put one more thing onto that, is what I tell people is I'm not teaching alignment, I'm teaching myofascial tuning. So
Mhm.
myo means muscle, fascia means your connective tissue. Like to think of them like guitar strings, these lines is kind of inspired a little bit by Tom Myers' anatomy train stuff. But to think of them going through the body. And all a very loose person is somebody who has loose guitar strings. And so they actually need to create more tension the same way you would actually, if you have a flat guitar string, you need to add more tension to it. And the whole point is that some people are tighter guitar strings and they need strategies to reduce the tension in their muscles, so we can find these perfect balances in our joints. So just trying to reframe the way we play the game a bit.
And it really like I don't know what comes first, but these are both important, and it's education and
Yeah,
awareness.
yeah,
Education and awareness, and I don't know
yeah,
which one comes first. Maybe it's a mix of the two, but they're both extremely important. And your book helps us with both. It helps educate us, and it helps
yeah,
bring us awareness of things that were previously unseen, so that we could apply choice and do something about it.
yeah, yeah. I love it. Yeah, it's hard. It is hard to say which one comes first. I mean, I definitely, if I had to pick one, and this is just first thing comes to my mind, I might change it after thinking about it for 5 minutes, but is I think education comes first. I mean, it's definitely one of my missions in Yoga Optimize is to take cerebral knowledge. Like if you gotta understand the physics of something, you have to understand the intention of something, and then that will help you to understand the language of sensation, right? I mean, so much of what I'm trying to do for people, like you know what it is? There's little symbols in the book, and it's basically this, like the education is like your GPS in your car,
Mhm.
okay? Where am I going? What am I doing? I'm trying to get to Whole Foods. It's over there. It's so many miles away. I got to go down the street, this street, this street. Great. Now, now that you know where you're going, okay, now you have to have your incoming afferent sensory nerves awake to what you're experiencing, and that is like a gas gauge or a speedometer, right? And then you need to have steering wheels and to learn how to work your gas pedal. That's gonna be your motor nervous system, right? And so both of those are what roughly you're calling awareness, right? It's basically a conversation about incoming, outgoing nervous system signals. But I've and you can make an argument chicken or egg thing. Okay, you need both, but I think it's really important to start with that GPS unit. I'm trying to get there. I'm trying to stretch this. I'm not trying to pinch this part of my lower back. Okay, great. That's what I'm trying to do. Now I need to learn how to use these muscles, steering wheels, and I need to feel what I'm happening here, break. And so the awareness is, I would say, kind of secondary, although it's secondary in the step to learning, not that's not more important.
Mhm. Ideally, we have that education, but sometimes we don't, and that's how you got your knee injured. You were doing yoga training with Patabi Joyce, and he was trying to get you into Mariachana D,
Yeah,
would, and you were like, it's not a pose you're easy to get into, and he kind of forced you into it, and he stepped your knee down, and like I don't know, 30 seconds later, after putting you in DA and you thought, oh, I finally did this pose, you heard like a snap, like a pop,
yeah,
and you had a severe strain of your LCL.
yeah.
And let's get there.
Yeah, okay, great. I mean, I definitely try and be careful of my language because one of my goals in Yoga Optimize is that of course we need responsible yoga teachers out there, right? I'm not trying to give all yoga teachers a get out of jail free card. I've seen all kinds of people who've asked people to do inappropriate things, whatever. Okay, so that's not it. However, I think there's a lot more onus on students to be educated. I don't know if you see what I'm pointing out here. Um, like one of the things I want to do to promote the book is like people ask all the time, or they look at the book and go, "Oh wow, big thick book, 350 pages. That's for yoga teachers." I'm like, "No, no, no. This is for yoga students. This is for everyone, for exactly the same reason. Like because for me, coming back to that same experience, I never use the language of somebody forced me into a pose. Like I was clueless. I was totally clueless. Like
Mm,
back to those analogies, I didn't have a GPS unit. I didn't know what I was trying to do. I thought I was trying to do endpoint. I was trying to get my hand clasped and one leg in half lotus. But now I'm like, no, I'm trying to feel a stretch in the shoulder as my arm wraps around my back shoulder. As I bring my bottom leg into half lotus, I'm trying to stretch my abducting muscles on the side of the hip. Okay, that's what I'm trying to feel. What I'm not trying to feel is pinching in my knee. If I'm starting to feel some kind of pulling in my ligaments, and honestly, I didn't need to go to 1 year of kinesiology school to learn all that stuff. Like honestly, if you read this book and you sit in the bathroom and just read the first 40 pages, I think you'll have a pretty good handle of what you need to educate yourself about, what tension and compression feel like.
uh,
So that's kind of my point is that I was just not an educated yoga student. And so I really want to shift the conversation into like scuba diving, for example. Like, okay, your dive master can watch your little tank and say, you've only got this much oxygen left or whatever. But ultimately, your dive master shouldn't have to police you. You should be educated. If you're gonna go scuba diving, you gotta know what oxygen levels are. You gotta know what nitrogen is. You have to know this stuff. Like we just don't let people go scuba diving unless they understand this. But somehow, again, it comes back to what I was saying, because yoga is spiritual. Now we have a deeper lens into this. Oh, it's just spiritual, like la la, woo woo, purple chakra spinning this way. Just go do the pose and do this, that, that. That's what I'm saying. We get sloppy about it, and we have uneducated people put into situations where they're putting loads on the body. And I mean, I do agree that I was put into a position where I wouldn't put that much load on my body. Someone else did it, but I should have known better to have been like, that's not what we're trying to feel. Like I'm out. And
Uh,
yeah,
and it really takes us back to one of your earliest inspirations, Joseph Campbell.
yeah,
And it's about the process, not the destination. And
yeah,
all these egos are wanting the destinations, whether that be mariachi D or this pose or this pose or this car or this thing, and we're missing like the sweetness of the
yeah,
song and the process, and it's the now. It's how the
yeah.
feeling in the now, and it's the surrender and that Ishvara Pradana in the now. Um,
Here's a little bit more to it. I think everyone gets, I mean, I don't think it's a big revelation to people that, oh, our egos can hurt us in yoga pose. I mean, I think everyone knows that. Okay, great. I could explain that to a 3-year-old kid. They get it. But what I feel is a bit of a literacy gap is that it's actually not, and again, let me say one more thing. What, because with the book, I had to think about a lot. Am I trying to prevent yoga injuries? I'm actually not. What I realize is there's a binary seesawness to it, of that as you prevent the yoga injuries. So again, if you're just watching it, I'm letting my left hand's going up. Then the other side of the seesaw is preventing yoga injuries on one side. Is going to actually go down, but then the benefits are going to go up. Do you see? It's one thing. Like in one, as you increase the benefits of the pose, your risks of injuries will go down.
mhm.
And um, yeah, it's surprisingly easy to educate yourself about what you need to know in order to decrease the risk and increase the benefits.
Hmm. And from what I've read so far, like, um, I feel that like you're encouraging us to use these postures to like find our comfort zone in these postures
Mhm.
based on like alignment and tension and um, proper biomechanics, and then like challenge ourselves, and then find our bliss, find our stillness, find our peace in that advanced version, and then if we can't, then it's just back out.
Yeah,
And we're gradually pushing the bar forward rather than taking like a giant leap and like without caution of the wind. That's a bit
yeah,
irresponsible.
yeah.
Um, and kind
Let
of
me let me
going.
backtrack one step because I realized there was a loop I didn't finish on that last point.
Okay,
And
okay.
that is, okay, I was saying that just I realized it was an unfinished note and it relates to what you're saying now. And that's why what jogged this for me. And as I said, okay, a 3-year-old kid understands their egos hurts us. And again, I made the point that as you decrease the risk of injuries, you increase the benefits. Okay, great. But what increases the risk of injuries or decreases the benefit is our ego, sure. But actually, what I found more often than not is a lot of people have their egos in check, but they're just uneducated. I don't know if something simple, okay, we do teachers training courses every year, right?
Uh-huh.
We're doing revolve triangle pose. And okay, so right foot forward, you bring your left hand around the right shin, reaching your right arm to the air. Most people let their hip go off to the side a little bit. In fact, actually, our class stood in the back of another class. I'm looking at it. I mean, it's kind of like, you're not supposed to check people out, but we're just like, there's a window, no one could see. I'm like, and we're looking at a class of like 30 people, and pretty much 30 of them have their hip stuck off to the side, right? They're side bending at the waist. So I'm like, okay, well, what are we trying to do here on revolve triangle pose? And literally 30 people were like, I don't know. Where like no, we're trying to do here, but I'm like, where are you trying to feel the stretch?
Uh-huh.
Right? And no one knew where they're trying to feel the stretch. And without me having to say anything, like I have this concept called duo and all this, without me having to explain anything super technical, I'm like, you're actually supposed to feel it in your oblique muscles on the side. And I mean, there's many reasons why. Let me rephrase that. I want you to feel, okay, you might have a different intention for the pose, but the intention of the pose in Blissology is to feel your oblique muscles on the side of the hip, on the side of the waist, and your IT band, glute medius, tensor fasciae lata on the side of the hip. You want to feel those stretch. And just by me telling that to people, 90% of them like, oh, okay, I can do that. And they just readjusted their body to feel it. And that's what I'm trying to say
Uh-huh.
is there's this whole, it goes back to that analogy of we have all these people doing yoga and they don't have a GPS unit. Like they don't even know why they're doing what they're doing. Or maybe we call it a spinal twist and they're just trying to twist their spine as much as possible, or trying to get their hand to the floor in a revolved triangle pose. And that's what I'm saying back to the other point of they're actually missing the tension. Okay, so that's what I was trying to get at previously is that's not ego. It's not that these people are in their ego. It's just they're kind of clueless, right? And again, it's a lack of education and yoga is a spiritual thing. I keep repeating myself now, but it requires movement education in order to get the most out of it and not injure yourself. And yeah, sure, the ego thing's important as well.
hmm So education is so important. Let's get into your education. Who are some of your yoga teachers? What is like your lineage to yoga?
Sure. I mean, I originally started doing Shivananda yoga back in the day, it was called. And then in the mid to early 90s, I moved to Hawaii, Maui, and then I started doing Ashtanga. And then basically, I'd say Ashtanga is what I did, although I did go to a lot of Iyengar classes in the 90s is pretty much Ashtanga, Iyengar, or maybe a little bit of Kundalini sprinkled around here or there, which I don't actually have a lot of experience with. Um, and but I would say mostly I was Ashtanga yoga guy, and then power yoga started coming, which is basically based off Ashtanga. Um, and then yeah, and I did get that injury, right? We can talk about whose fault it was another time, or I think I've given my opinion on that. I take responsibility for it.
Uh,
Um, and so I would say probably my biggest yoga influence, even though I haven't trained with these people, and I that's what I love about the early part of the book is I got to tell it as a story. And one of the things I actually really believe in is crediting teachers. And that's an interesting thing. For me, it's a real big thing. Like I feel like in science, they're so particular to say like this person's paper says this, and this research project says this, so and so et al. Said this. But in yoga, there's this feeling of like it just belongs to everybody. And okay, maybe that's true, and maybe that's part of the spiritual part of it. And everyone's gonna work their way out. But for me, if I like if I try and tell people that I came up with an original idea, but it's someone else's, it comes back to the Yoga Sutras. It's like a non-stealing thing. I'm like, I'm actually using someone else's idea. I mean, I took I actually, oddly enough, studied at one point copyright law in university, and it's called passing off, right? If you pass off someone else's ideas as your own. And for me, it doesn't feel good not to credit things. So anyway, back to who are my teachers, I'm really happy to have, but as a long-winded way of saying, I really was happy to be able to credit my teachers. Unfortunately, no one really knows them. One is this woman named Joya Irwin, who doesn't teach anymore, but she used to teach in her basement. She's not like you used to see her at a Wanderlust or at some big festival. She was very mellow. And I mean, for her teachers were Arit Sengupta and Dona Holoman. I worked with both of them, but mostly with Joya. And I would say from what you are reading in Yoga Optimized, um, I would definitely have to give them the most credit for the lineage. And aside from
mhm.
that, yeah, I definitely learned from like Tom Myers was did structural integration, and yeah, I'd say those are my real big shapers.
Uh-huh. And who are you currently studying, and like what are you currently studying?
Yeah, I mean it's funny because Intia asks me this all the time, like who I would go study yoga with, and I don't actually. I mean, I don't know if it sounds weird, but I don't actually have a yoga teacher, but I'm really interested. I mean, I'm actually just doing university courses, right? Like I did anatomy and physiology through Harvard Medical School. I'm actually in the neuroscience program right now. I'm doing exercise physiology at UC Berkeley. So I'm really interested in like that's what's keeping it fresh is I'm really interested in some of the more inner workings of what I'm telling you. I mean, I just told you like the nervous system is a whole other, I told you the nervous system has afferent incoming nerves or in I mean everyone knows this like outgoing nerves, okay, motor nerves. But like I'm at the level now where I'm like looking at how the sodium potassium pump works and how this action potentials actually work and what is the biochemistry of it. And not that I need to do that in order to do it, it's just that's my interest. And it's just brings me to awe, like to know what's going on when I'm moving my fingertip like that, like
Hmm.
and again, I'm not trying to do this to be smarter. It's just like, wow, that potassium came from then when I eat a banana that day, I'm like that potassium is helping my nerves conduct a signal. So when I'm pressing my foot down there, it just in a yoga pose, I'm like, wow, this is all. It just, I mean, the big lesson really of all this, if you want to be happy, is interconnection. And when you get stuck on your own self and your ego, yeah, it's a problem in yoga and spirituality. And when you see yourself as part of an interconnected world, and I think biochemistry does this, when you see this, how we are just so recycled Lego blocks all the time, you know?
Yeah, well, one of your greatest inspirations, nature, sh
Yeah,
shows us this all the time, the interconnectedness of things.
yeah, it's true. It's true. And yeah, and I mean the soulful science is chapter. I mean the book, just in case people don't know, has three different parts. It's actually on the
Uh,
inside. It's actually on the inside cover. So the first part is yoga is a feeling, not just a shape. Basically explains how I learned that, but how I didn't know it at first, and it led to an injury, and the people that helped me to understand this. And then soulful science is this middle section, which really is, I don't even know if people can read that, but anyway, that's what it says if you could read it. And then the last section is more about the asana deep knowledge, it's called. But I feel like the soulful science is kind of first principles that will help you to understand the asana part of the book. And a lot of it gets into breathing physiology. And yeah, it's just incredible to me that like, why do we breathe? I ask this question in groups all the time. People get it. They're like, oh, it makes me feel more calm. Like, okay, that's the way yogis do it. It can actually make you feel more anxious, also, or more wrapped up. But in yoga, we associate it with this slowing down mechanisms. And people are like, yeah, well, we have to metabolize our food, right? Okay, so great, people get it. But really, it's just such a two for one part of it. Like, in the feeling more calm through the breath, that's one big benefit. Just and exhale it out. But then when you really start again to look at it from a nature point of view of, which is, and again, you can look at it from a really hippie of like, oh, we're so connected to the trees, man. But when you can look at it from a science point of view, and that's why I call it soulful science, and go, yeah, that carbon is like you're actually, you have a hydrated carbon that you're eating called a carbohydrate in the form of a mango, right? That becomes sugar in your body. The oxygen, the product of the or the actually the off gas of the trees is actually helping you to metabolize that to take the energy from that tree that you've eaten and metabolize it into ATP fuel to help you move your fingers in a yoga pose and then you breathe off and you're connected to that tree. To me it's just like it's an antidepressant, and so I guess we got two topics on the table. One is, well, actually three. One is about the breath, but one is about nature in general, how being connected to nature really is a secret to happiness. Like, and the third part of it is that science really should not be in here from different category of yoga and spirituality, but it is actually good yoga. It is good spirituality.
Mhm. So a thing I'm really curious about is like, what does your personal yoga practice look for you like these days, and like how has that evolved? So and I'm not
Yeah,
just talking about your asana.
yeah, it's actually really funny because it's funny because I want to talk to somebody most people know in the yoga world. Talk about somebody, a friend of mine, Dylan Warner.
Oh,
I don't know
yeah.
if you know, yeah, okay, most
Yeah, he's
people.
very good pose, very good asanas.
Very good asana, right?
Yeah.
Um, and we became friends because I used to live in Bali. He was in Bali, and we'd have coffee a lot. He's a nerd too, and I love talking shop with him. Like I love it. He's one of my favorite guys to go have coffee with. And he's actually not just good at yoga. He actually really truly understands his craft and the science of the body. Anyhow, um, he said to me once, he goes, "Oh, I have a handstand practice and a yoga practice." At the time, I didn't really know what he meant, right? I kind of sort of did. I was like, yeah, I handstand, whatever. I do a few handstands too. Um, and it's actually really funny because going back in time, I think we had that conversation probably around 2000 or 2021 maybe. But going back to about 2016, 2015, I was doing classes for this app called Cody app, which is now called Allo Moves. So I went to Seattle. I used to live in California. They flew me up to Seattle to film some stuff. And I'm like, okay, let me see this Cody app thing. I'm like, who the heck is Dylan Warner and Patrick Beach? And why do they have like almost a million followers? What are they doing? I'm like, oh, this is just gymnastics. That's not yoga. Um, anyway, fast forward, to like 2018, 2019, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll try one of these one arm handstands sort of thing. I'm like, and actually, it's one of the things I told you I've been practicing for 37 years. Actually, part of it is that what people tell you is, oh, you're getting older, you're supposed to become more mellow and just do yin yoga by the fire and just, let your hair turn gray and chill out. Um, and I respect people who do that, and maybe that day will come for me. But what I'm actually learning, actually late in life, is actually bringing these harder, more calisthenics, gymnastic poses brought a whole freshness into my yoga practice that I wasn't expecting, and I really love it. So basically, I kind of feel like I fall into that same category. I don't know if I dropped enough breadcrumbs, but the original story is I told you Dylan has a handstand practice and a yoga practice. So I still have a yoga practice. I wake up and do my asana practice, but I will take time every day and I do, like, I guess now would fall under the category of calisthenics, where yeah, so asana is something that my asana practice is very fluid. I do a super flow practice, very fluid ocean spire practice, Tai Chi, surf moves. That's the asana practice. Then the calisthenics stuff is for people who don't understand calisthenics. I'm like, it's basically everything hard in yoga all at once, like crow to handstand and all this other stuff. And so I really have learned that I've really gotten a lot of joy into just separating those skills out. And I'll just maybe leave one other topic on the table related just to my own practice and just hopefully helping to inspire other people. Well, actually, it's two topics, but one of them is that I feel like the yoga asana practice, kind of what I was talking about, it does require a lot of skill. And so basically, one of the things that coming back to it, I keep putting the book up, and I am definitely pitching it because I do want you to buy it and read it and understand it, is that I did mention that it is complicated. And I feel like most people's experience of yoga, we talked about it before, is not meditation, it's yoga asana. Okay, great. But most people's, if you could drill into that a little bit more, then most people's asana practice is actually vinyasa yoga. In vinyasa yoga, where you just get one, maybe five breaths in a pose, coming back to the Ashtanga formula, like that's
Uh-huh.
25 seconds. So you really don't get that much chance. Like, why do people, back to like stringing things, previous conversations, why do people let their hips stick out and revolve triangle? It's because they only have 25 seconds to figure the pose out.
Mm.
And so and they're just getting like these cues. I can't teach people the intimate knowledge. I mean, I need 25 minutes to really teach people about revolved triangle, not 25 seconds. So a lot of people aren't sticking the work in to really learn that. So here it is as a summary, is that the vinyasa yoga practice is basically like a game if it was a sport. But I feel like whether it's handstands or just revolve triangle or whatever, like to really break the poses down, you need to do drills. You can't just have a game, you need to do drills. If you only play a game and you never do drills, if you're a soccer player and you haven't kicked the ball into that left-hand corner of the net 25 times in a game, you won't be able to do it as well. And so I feel like yoga practice needs the drills and it also needs the flow practice as well. So for me, I feel like that time where I just like I'll do things on repeat over and over and over again, like same poses, and I feel like as well as doing a vinyasa yoga practice, and I feel like that's a very important thing for yogis to learn.
Hmm. Is one of the drills, one of like in quotation drills, is like
Yeah.
weight training. You still you like lifting weights, correct? And
I
how
used
does
to.
that co and now you don't lift anymore?
Not I. Well, I don't very much anymore. Actually, it's funny. It's an interesting conversation. That's not to say I don't do strength work. I'm doing calisthenics.
Yeah,
So let me zoom way back. Basically, if you were to talk to me 10 years ago, I'm just going to talk about health in general, right? Or
yeah.
what I did. It'd be, and if it was an Venn diagram, it'd just be basically one circle would be meditation, the other one would be yoga, and that's what I did, right? Surfing mixed in. Okay. And then it's funny, when I lived in Santa Cruz, I didn't really find a yoga class that I wanted to go to, but I live next door to a gym. So I'm like, and I lived in a really small place. I couldn't practice. We had a young kid. So I'm like, oh, I'll just join the gym and try and do yoga there, but I don't know if you ever tried to do yoga in a gym. It's ridiculous. Like you're trying to do yoga and someone's throwing a medicine ball beside you and someone else is skipping rope and someone else shadow boxing. I'm like, this is not working. Anyhow, so I was like, I haven't lifted weights in a long time. Like I really didn't do it for, well, at that point, it's probably at least 15 years. So I'm like, I'll try it again. I actually really liked it. So slowly I started to add strength training back into that. So and then I had yoga, meditation, strength training. I told you I studied physiology. And the more I learned about the heart and the more I learned about mitochondria, the more I realized that, oh my God, I need to add cardio back into my life.
Uh,
So now where I think the intersection is yoga, meditation, cardio, and strength training. Now I might have
okay.
confused you because I said I don't do weight stuff anymore. I do every once in a while, but I'm just basically doing body weight stuff in the form of calisthenics. Right.
Hmm.
So I basically I do the rings and I've got I wish we'd talk a whole hour about the rings. I am like a ring evangelicist right now. Like I really feel like it's the best complement to yoga physically of anything because yoga is so much
Uh,
pulling and gymnastic or yoga is so much pushing, but gymnastic rings are so much pulling. My shoulders balanced out so much more after I started doing the rings. Anyway, so I do stuff like that and just like a lot of handstand push-ups and body weight stuff.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I wish we'll have to do that for another conversation,
Mhm.
more into all that physical aspect. There's just one last thing I'm just super curious to talk to you about. And we kind of alluded to it at the beginning, and that's the Yoga Sutras 2.46, 2.47, and 2.48. I think those are some of my favorite of the sutras, and those three sutras pertain to asana. Out of the all 196 sutras, only three of them have to do with physical postures, and it's those three. So just like your interpretation on 2.46, 2.47, and especially 2.48, where we
Thiram,
transcend
Thiram Sukha
dualities.
Asanam one.
What's that?
Thiram Sukham Asanam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, okay, sure. So, I mean, just to make sure everyone's with us, I'm assuming most people know Yoga Sutras, but Yoga Sutras basically you have these little sayings. It was written, they don't know exactly, but 2,400 years ago. And basically all these little aphorisms. They just give you little phrases, but they were basically little notes that a guru, an instructor, a teacher would use to tell you things. So it's really hard to know what these people meant when they give you like a little code word. Yoga, stiram, sukham, asanam means like every. that means that yoga asana is steady and comfortable. Okay, great. What does that exactly mean? There is a lot of room for interpretation. Just in terms of the Yoga Sutras, there were a lot of commentators who wrote after on it. And so to read the Yoga Sutras, you kind of have to read the commentaries on the Yoga Sutras. Anyhow, by going into what that sutra exactly means, I mean, first of all, most people believe that when they talk about asana, it actually means the seat. Asana means seat, the seat that you would take in meditation. So I don't even think they're referring to the original, like any yoga posture. Although years later, some of the commentators start to mention, I think it was 10 different yoga poses. I won't get into that. But let's twist it a little bit and say, okay, sure, let's just pretend that it does apply to physical yoga postures. Steady and comfortable is really the prescription of, yeah, actually, it's a great summary, I think, of what I'm trying to bring out in yoga. You mentioned people who are hypermobile or very flexible. Um, I'm not getting down on people like that, right? That's great, the ability, but um, I look at people and they like these people who can just like open their legs up wide, Upavishta Konasana or whatever, and put their chest on the floor and they can basically fall asleep and they don't even feel any stretch in the hamstrings. It's just so comfortable, right? That's Sukha. It's just so comfortable. But really, if you came by and shook them, there's no tension in the body, which could be a good or bad thing. But if they're under load, I would like if you just lie on the floor and you're not resisting gravity, it's not such a bad thing. But if you're doing a standing pose or whatever, TT Boston, let's say where you're doing the same pose balanced on your hands, and you don't understand how to distribute the load through your body, if you're just moving towards only flexibility with no stability, and I don't know if I fully unpack this, stira means steadiness. Okay, so I'm twisting that a little bit to say stability and maybe twisting a little bit sukha to mean comfort, but as in flexibility, is that I think that's it. Is you want, I mean, to me, I think there's room to, and again, I get that we're reinterpreting this. This is not what they originally meant in the Yoga Sutras, but I think there's room to interpret this to the modern era of that you need to have flexibility, but you also need to have stability as well. And so, what we haven't talked about is what the general concept in the book is called duo, which is like a vector of force that you would press in both ways, that the yoga student has to press in both ways in order to create that tension. And when you press along these lines of duo in the poses, basically, there is going to be three S's, letter S, three S's, stability, stretch, and space. Space meaning not compression, like not excessive compression, not, but well distributed compression in your joints. And so, yeah, that's ultimately a really good way of looking at the work that I'm trying to present, is it is honoring that. I hope that wasn't too long an explanation, but when you use do on a pose, when you press out through all these endpoints, you will feel flexibility and stretch exactly in the precise area where you're trying to find it. And you also feel steady, um, but not rigid as well. And you'll have your joints will be very happy. You have space in them.
Hmm. Hmm. And when we apply all these in harmony, it helps us transcend duality into a place of non-duality. What have you understood about non-duality?
Oh, we're gonna go Tantra on this one, or Advaita Vedanta. Non-duality, yeah. Um, yeah, the fastest way I can, okay, so we just did a big switch into philosophy just for people who can follow, but non-duality is a beautiful concept. And really, I think that to understand this concept, I think we have to understand the limitations of the grammar that we inherit. So when you say, I am doing revolve triangle, there is you, the doer, and then there's this pose that's being done somehow, you know? And you basically, in a non-dual state, it means that there's not a subject-object relationship. Um, you're just like there's just a revolved triangle pose, and your inner commentary mind is not there making any judgments about it. It's just like clear one thing, revolved triangle with a, I mean, it's funny, there's another concept called shunyata, which means emptiness, and it just means that you're don't have this cluttered mind. There's just a pure experience of what you're doing, this present moment awareness you brought up earlier in the conversation. And yeah, that's what that I feel like it actually puts a really nice bow on why I wrote this book first about the physical yoga practice, because I said of getting the most benefits and minimizing the injuries, but it's also when you get this space, stability, and stretch, and it's when you have these lines of tension, of duo in the body, it's like literally you're suspended from the ceiling like puppet strings. And there's, I mean, I start to feel this back to my teachers I was talking to when I was in Joy's class. It was something totally different. Like I was just floating in space, this grounded, spacious feeling. And because my body felt a certain way, my mind could totally relax. And I hope everyone's with me. What I've actually learned is that a yoga pose requires the right amount of effort. And by effort, I mean ATP, chemical energy, like contraction of muscles, and the right amount of relaxation. And I just keep coming back to it over and over again, is I feel like one of the major problems in yoga when we're under load is we're passive, or at least too uneducated about what muscles need to light up to give us both the physical benefits, but also this feeling of non-duality that you brought up.
And one place where they can learn more about it is your magnum opus, 10 years in the making, Yoga
Yeah.
Optimized,
Yep.
available on blissology.com, amazon.com, and retail outlets worldwide.
Yeah.
Um, I'm excited to delve deeper into this book. I'm already 5 chapters in, and the
Great.
beauty of this book is there's much, much more. I think there's 340 pages.
Yeah,
Um,
well, can I do one other plug? And that is
yeah.
that if you go to the blissology.com/yoga optimized page, I think and there's actually books/yoga optimized. Anyway, if you just go to blissology.com, find the yoga optimized page. What I'm actually doing right now, I've shot a whole bunch of videos. So in the book, let me say it this way. I can't find one just off without, I didn't know I was going to talk about this, but there's little QR codes. So I said like some things are hard to read through, like you got to really concentrate. But I've made a bunch of videos that are the length of Instagram reels. So on our Instagram, I have I'm going through the book. Like I think so far I've gone to page 31, but it's going to keep going. So you'll be able to pick out certain topics, and I'll explain it to you in 90 seconds as well. So I'm just trying to tell you that I guess the summary of that is there are free resources on our Blissology Instagram. We'll put them on our YouTube. There's another page called Yoga Optimized /resources that will help. Like just again, as I already mentioned, they're just little 90-second videos that will really help to bring some of the stuff to life.
Hmm. And your ultimate vision with this book?
Mm, my ultimate vision is that I guess I bring it back to this whole thing about nerdiness and awe, that people are educated yoga practitioners, that they know how tension and compression are supposed to be applied in the body, and that they can feel this through their incoming nerves and guide their outgoing nerves to create the best experience for that. And that we stop practicing one size fits all yoga, but people are educated to know how to do the poses that fit them rather than trying to fit someone else's poses. And in that, we fall radically in love with our bodies, with our minds. And from that, we become better stewards of the planet and our relationships and our communities.
And we could take it far beyond our yoga mat and we could really live it. We could live this feeling of
Exactly.
bliss,
That's it. That's it. And that
of awe.
we're all, yeah, it's yeah, what where the yoga practice leads you to a place inside of yourself that's beautiful. And I call it the wise guide inside. And you want it to guide you on your mat, but you also want it to guide you in all your relationships.
Thank you so much. Well, it's been a real pleasure and honor to
Yeah.
have this chat number two with you, and I look forward to a future one down
Yeah.
the road when I'm all done with this book. And I know how much it's going to help me as a yoga student, as a yoga teacher, and as a human being. And I hope the same for everyone out there. So find that at blissology.com. They can connect with you on social media at the Blissologist or at the Blissology at Blissology.
Yeah.
You're basically Blissology everywhere. So just type that in, Blissology, and it'll take you to all what you need to be.
Thanks, Derek.
Thanks, Ian. Let's close with a fist bump.
Woo!
Boom. Thank you so much.
Double shaka.
To more reading, to more learning, and to more awe. Aloha.